Hey, Jonathan here. Before we get to the episode, I wanted to let you know that we had a little technical difficulty during the recording, so the sound changes a little bit about halfway through the episode. Still can totally hear the guest, but it's a little funky, so I wanted to give you a heads up. All right, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark, and today I'm joined by guest Ben Kettle. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Pleased to be invited.
So we're going to talk about Ben's story, breaking free of hourly billing and all of the wondrous life that can be found on the other side of that. But first, Ben, could you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Ben Kettle. I'm a town planner in England, UK, and the main part is it's a consultancy role, taking clients through the sort of planning process. So in the sort of US contacts, that's sort of like urban planning. In the US, I believe it's sort of more sort of zone led, and often if it complies, it's sort of approved as a right. In England, it's a bit more discretionary and judged on merits against a series of policies, sort of national and in your local area. And you find sort of schemes that might comply with one policy conflict with another. And so there's an art really to navigating that process on behalf of clients. And my specialty is in the sort of rural countryside context, where often policies dictate that development shouldn't go ahead, and therefore it's trying to find a way through those policies for the clients based on experience and various sort of fallbacks that we can develop. So yeah, it's a real interesting role, and importantly, you can unlock a lot of potential for sort of clients, whether that's business or personal.
Okay, cool. And what kinds, just for most of the folks listening are like software developers and stuff. Who are your clients? Like who hires you? Is it basically architects or developers?
Yeah, yeah. So the person hiring is, yeah, it could be sort of developers looking obviously to take land forward. It could be individual landowners. It could be farmers looking to if they need sort of new sheds for livestock or machinery. It could be your householder who just wants a new bigger house. A lot of sort of over here is popular is sort of equestrian, like horse horse facilities. So yeah, a real wide range of development all taking place in the rural area. The big value items are housing development on sort of undeveloped greenfields adjacent to settlements, essentially.
Got it. Okay, so before we get into how you decided to set up your business, could you tell us a little bit about what was your experience before that?
Yeah, so I started my career in planning at local authorities. That's sort of public sector, dealing with the applications that are made to the council and determining them, obviously refusing or approving. And then after 8 years, moved into the private sector, and that was a real eye opener in terms of how the sort of private and sort of more commercial world worked. And straight off the bat, I was launched into recording hours, hourly rates. At that point in time, there was myself and the owner of the company. I was the first hire, and it was all like estimate based. So you have the first stage with where we're sort of preparing the application, working with other consultants on various sort of specialist consultants on different disciplines like the architect, ecologist, um, highways, all these sorts of things. And then once it's submitted to the council, that was what we call post submission, which again, that sort of the first stage is more in our control. The second stage was out of our control because you're then into the political world. There's officers looking at it. It's sort of very externally influenced. And we started with an estimate with a client. More often than not, that estimate would double or triple or quadruple as they sort of went through the process, which often was palatable for them if they got the scheme approved. But if they were still faced with that fee, having faced a refusal, it did lead to some sort of sour grapes and disgruntled clients. And I suppose for the company, you're then into the write off world and all of that. nastiness that goes with it. So that was sort of how I sort of started in the private sector. Is it helpful to go on in terms of how that grew? Because the company did grow from that point, or
Yeah, and you mentioned in the email you had a hilarious word choice. You said something like all the nonsense that goes with hourly billing. So it would be it'd probably be interesting to hear what some of that nonsense was as the company grew.
yeah. So over the sort of 8 years that I was there, we obviously went from myself and the owner up to a team of around about 9 or 10, all sort of doing planning or associated work, and it just became for me a bit of a, as I say, sort of nonsense where we're estimating based on experience of what might or might not have worked in the past. Um, but then you sort of got situations where it moved into a first stage being sort of a fixed fee, but that was again just built on multiples of hourly rates, and then once it was submitted, going on to just an estimate of time. But you end up with situations where I felt people perhaps wouldn't, or the team wouldn't necessarily speak to the a colleague possibly about a scheme because they were sort of worried about incurring two lots of sort of billable hours against the sort of client work, or you could have situations where two or three people would just invite themselves to sort of help with the scheme, but then you're left with three or four lots of time for that hour or two that was spent. Um, you end up with situations where a scheme's been refused. You're sort of then liaising with the client, sort of talking them through the next steps and what can be done to try and resolve the situation, whether that's obviously like through an appeal, but all the time the clock's running, and the client is then sort of facing a bill for being told what you can do about the refusal that's just happened, that they're already on the hook for. And I think for me, there was a lot of, aside from the sort of client side of things, just the team. Um, we went through various iterations of whether we sort of communicated to the team about their sort of billable targets and what was expected, to then not communicating to them about what the expectation was, but trying other levers, because it created, I think, a sense of stress and overwhelm for some colleagues, where they were worried about recording enough time. They were probably not delivering top customer service or client service because that would then sort of push over the estimate, or it just created tensions. And the amount of meetings as like a management team you had about sort of billable time and targets and performance, and it just seemed to create a whole unnecessary secular motion of nonsenseness and headaches, and yeah, it just there seemed to be no end.
Yeah, it creates perverse incentives that have nothing to do with the outcome or the work or the quality. Yeah. So that's great backstory. So you've described, for your industry, your version of what I experienced personally when I was managing a software dev shop. It's the same kind of thing. All these weird incentives which are in conflict. It's like, make sure you bill enough hours, but don't bill too many hours because then the client will get angry and then we'll have to fight. And then, and it's just there's a million. Of course, I've talked for hours and hours and hours about this. You just gave a great example, so I'll shut up. So what caused you? So eventually, at some point, you went solo. I think it was like 6 months ago, 7 months ago.
Yeah. So 7 months ago. So the lead into, the lead into that was a few things sort of contributed. We had, um, I was sort of growing within the company and taking on more responsibility. It sort of felt like for me to expand my personal earnings more, there was probably a disproportionate requirement because of the hourly model. It meant probably after I had like one or two more people to this team, take on a load more sort of cost and risk to sort of then leverage quite small percentages of that total mass. So
Yeah. So I was aware that there was always going to be a ceiling in terms of earning for me, and even if there was a degree of ownership in the business, that the hires, that the way the model works, basically you need to grow by people to grow revenue, to grow profit, to have sort of a piece of that. So yeah, that became sort of pretty clear at that point. And I think I'd by that point I'd already been exposed to the other way of sort of pricing work, and there was so much ingrained in the company that I was at in terms of hourly. It felt like it was going to be a huge undertaking to sort of transform that, and sort of felt like I probably didn't have the energy or probably question some of the buy-in from others to sort of make that happen. So I felt like going out on my own was the option, and combine that also with I love doing the client work, and obviously as the company grows, you get further and further away from actually hands-on doing what you like. All sort of 3 or 4 things came together in synergy, and then I was sort of down the not quite rabbit hole of obviously podcasts like yourselves, various sort of books by various authors and posts, and just really sort of trying to hone in on what was going to sort of make all that happen.
Wow, that's the perfect storm of issues you realized kind of all at the same time that were, let's just say, holding you back and moving you away from the kind of work that you like doing and toward like a more management role that you probably didn't like as much. So you went out on your own, and how was, and I know we're going to get to, you sort of have 3 different pricing options for people when they come along. We're going to talk about that. But I'm curious, when you first went out, what that was like for you. Like, how did that feel? Were you nervous? How did you get your first client? Like, what was the whole first step out?
Yeah, sort of I suppose a degree of nervousness. I'd probably been a lot of people I speak to about starting a consultancy or starting on your own speak about how difficult and hard work and sort of winning work is. Whether there's some exceptions out there, it's been pretty plain sailing. So a lot of the work I've had has been 100% word of mouth recommendation from either previous people or sort of architects or connections I've had. I've either put somebody in touch or people I've worked with who've then recommended me rather than the company that was at. So yeah, it was the initial nerves that you probably expect, but very quickly, sort of things are up and running. Obviously, clients on the phone, proposals being issued, work undertaken. So yeah, it was there was in terms of runway, in terms of getting up to speed, like the first month was very comfortably billing what I needed to. So yeah, there wasn't really a delay or anything like that, fortunately.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so let's switch over to the pricing. So you outlined a model that, as you say in the email, I wouldn't exactly call value pricing, but it's extremely outcome focused, which is fabulous. And of course, it has nothing to do with time. So could you describe to folks maybe what you first went to market with, and then if it's evolved over time at all?
Yeah, definitely. So first went to market, and while I was sort of transitioning out of employment to myself, very first instruction was based on a sort of fixed initial fee, and then on this sort of hourly thing after submission. Probably it was comfortable, and it was a sort of the first go on my own. Since that, it's been exclusively fixed fee, and that has been sort of a bit of an evolution. So I've been trying always to give at least 2, if not 3, prices and options for clients. I've been obviously listening to podcasts and Alan Weiss and Chris Deere and all the sort of people that explain about giving those options. Often in planning, there's only really one sort of route through sort of the process, the application type, and getting clients from A to B. So started off with offering sort of different levels of sort of light touch application, and then one that was a bit more involved with obviously all the consultants that I felt we needed. and then a model that also included an appeal wrapped up into that. What I sort of found with that was often the client could then be underrepresented when the application goes in. So it almost puts the outcome at risk because they've not had all the necessary people and specialists involved from the outset, and then sort of so far has sort of settled on for the most part this three option approach where there's a fixed fee option one, which is paid regardless of outcome. So the client is taking all of the risk at that point on my employment, the advice that obviously spells out the risks to them and whether they go ahead. That's just on them. That fee is value based in terms of there's probably some fine tuning to do, but there's sort of conversations with the client in terms of what they're looking to achieve, whether that's pinned to like a financial outcome, a personal outcome, a problem that's going to be solved, and trying to understand what level of value that adds to them. The recognizing that there's risk in planning, the second option is then a shared risk approach, which often has looked like a 50% reduction or up to 50% reduction on that fixed fee. But if it is approved, there's then sort of 100% on the backside. So I don't know. Let's say if option one is 10 grand, then if they go with option two and it's approved, the outlay to the client would be 20. But through that they've been able to mitigate their initial investment.
Okay, but if it doesn't go through, then they only paid 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They've sort of there's a bit of balance there, and then the third option is almost like no win no fee. So it's 0%, zero commitments up front, but that success fee is 4 or 5x the fixed fee option.
That's hilarious because that maps to my Goldilocks pricing.
Yes.
Curve.
Yeah, and so far, so the perhaps play. So some of this is mitigated for risk. So not always is option 3 offered, because if I think it's super sort of high risk and I'm not comfortable sort of swallowing that sort of expertise, sometimes that's the one that comes off the table. But so far, when 3 have been offered, option 2 has been by far the preferred approach.
Right. So they pay a little bit up front, and then they pay it like only if it goes through. Yeah, I mean that's such a great illustration of who's taking the. It's a great illustration of someone who is revealing to the client where the risk is and who gets compensated for taking the risk. So in the $10,000 option, the client's taking all the risk, but the reward's really big. I mean, they saved at least $15,000 or pounds or euros, whatever. And if they take no risk up front, but then you slam dunk it, then you get 50 grand. So 5 times more than they would have paid if they'd picked option 1. But the experience of the process, how long does one of these processes that not all of these, but the ones that you do, how long of a monthly wise, not hours wise, but in calendar, are these things like 6-month things? Or are they more like 1 or 2 or 3?
Yeah, so it's time elapsed is anywhere 9 to 12 months from getting going to having the outcome.
Wow. Okay. And that's to the approval or rejection.
Yeah, and a lot of that time, is due to the sort of what we call councils, like the sort of local authority delays. So hands-on time is nowhere near 9 to 12 months in terms of touch points. A lot of it is just delays and waiting. So there's an intense period at the start, and then it's just a monitoring exercise largely.
Okay. Wow. So I just love this illustration where it's just the 3 tiers are not good, better, best. They're not phased. It's purely price based on how much risk there is. But your core price, that option 1 price, is based from client to client. And then the multiples are more or less the same if you offer all three. They're more or less the same multiples.
Yeah, and sometimes if I'm not comfortable with the sort of £0 up front, that there might be an option too that's, I don't know, 25% initial reduction and then a 50% on top. Very often, how I've tried to work it is the discount that's applied up front for the risk sharing is then just doubled for myself on the backside, and that seems to make me comfortable. Whether there's some iterations of that to come, we'll sort of see.
And so far, what's your success rate? So are you getting a lot of those success fees?
So we're probably a bit early on some of the instructions, because we're probably just getting to the stage where there's going to be the approvals. The ones I've had through have just been that sort of fixed fee model that I sort of started with. I'm sort of confident that the ones that have had the risk sharing approach will get approved. And I think that just comes with the experience of knowing where the sort of pitfalls are in approaches, how to position them. And I suppose that essentially it will, when all said and done, probably become a bit of a numbers game where there are going to be some losses. And I think for every bit of reward that you want to go after and capture, you need to obviously you take some risk, and that's I'm comfortable with that. And I think I'm comfortable because the going back to your opening in terms of the income side at this sort of 6-7 month juncture, the sort of money in the bank company wise exceeds comfortably previous salary. So I think that's given me in this sort of first 12 months trading just the sort of confidence to say, right, back yourself here. You know sort of what you're doing. You're going to win application wise more than you're going to lose comfortably, and so go and get the reward.
Right, because the upside for the win, I mean, even if you had a 50-50 win rate, the upside of the win is so much bigger than the downside right. So it's like, so what have you found as you've started working on projects where the hours are just not involved? What did you notice in terms of like the way that it felt to work on the projects and the kinds of things you were deciding to do? Was there anything different about how it felt or what you decided to do as you were actually doing the work based on the financial incentives?
Yeah, and I think previously when we sort of scope work in terms of hours, it would be broken down by task, and I think what it almost felt like, if you came to the meaty part of the work that we do, is called a planning statement. It's basically a written justification for the proposals, the planning scheme. If you'd have scoped say 10 hours for that, you'd sit back and think, right, this needs to be a pretty heavy document and cover a lot of bases. Whereas at the moment with these options that I do, I don't define whether we're going to have a planning statement that's 2 pages or 10 pages or 20 pages. So I think when I go through the scheme, it sometimes feels like, well, a cover letter is going to do this, and I think you're able to exercise that judgment a bit more. And conversely, if I think it's really opened up the client relationship side, because if there's been a time when it's felt appropriate to go and see a client a second time, or just make that sort of second call or third call, or just you're not worried about, right, this is taking an hour longer than it should, or you're not worried about the client balking at the fee and saying, well, that time that you just popped in to see me, I didn't invite you. You came, we spoke for half an hour. Why have you charged me X or Y for it? So you can, part of the whole sort of process that led to going on my own. I read the book called Raving Fans. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but essentially it's centered on sort of, raving fans, Ken Blanchard and Sheldon Bowles, and essentially it rests on like outstanding customer service. And I think sometimes the hourly model, one way or another, gets in the way of that, because you feel hemmed in by some sort of restriction, whether that's at the time, like a sort of an estimate of fixed fee, or with fear of what the client is going to say after the fact about the your good intention, but then that's cost them money they didn't want to spend. So it's
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. It really limits your ability to do what you think is the right thing to do in the circumstance. And you have to kind of live up to the original estimate, which might not be right. Um, or it might be full of stuff, maybe not in your case, but it might be full of stuff that takes a long time, but doesn't really move the needle that much, but it looks like a lot of work, like a 20-page proposal. So that might always just get stuffed in there because, oh, that's a bunch of hours and we need to make up an excuse for why we're charging so much money, kind of thing. So have you noticed you're still pretty early in the transition. Have you noticed that there's a different vibe with the clients?
Yeah, definitely. It just feels a lot more open, a lot able to sort of get to know the clients better and to understand their just how they work in much more sort of deep way. So I've got one of the early instruction that I mentioned that was on the hourly rate. The client in that one wrote a tongue-in-cheek email saying, I'm just going to keep my emails and calls short after sort of a first invoice. And compare that to, I caught up with a previous client, sort of phoned just with some issues on the sort of previous work that had been done, and was genuinely gobsmacked about the potential of doing like a fixed fee arrangement on a scheme. They'd been subject to um, fees they were basically 3.5 times what they were expecting at the end of the outcome, and obviously then became or had learned that they'd become sort of involved in a bit of a battle then over fees after the fact, but they were blown away by the potential to get, because you do have other sort of consultants that do the fixed fee approach, but I think that at the level of advice I consider myself positioned at and offering, don't tend to get that fixed fee commitment or the sort of skin in the game approach that I'm sort of peddling at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that they liked it a lot better. It
Mm.
might be too soon to say this, but in the model where someone's taken option 2 or option 3, have you had any that were accepted that then the client was like reluctant to make the success fee payment, or no big deal?
No, no, we've had I've had one on the success fee, and that's sort of forthcoming. And I think it's interesting, actually, going back to your previous question. It's interesting the approach. I'm just thinking of another client where we're just sort of through the realms of we've gone to appeal, not because it's been refused, just because it was taking too long with the council. And his approach is very much, when we get this approval, I've got your money here waiting, and so it's very much sort of forward looking and outcome looking and reward looking, rather than, or hope the bill's not too much, or do you know that
Oh
approach.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it drives focus
right.
much
Yeah, I
more.
remember the days of filling out a timesheet, a big timesheet. Like, it was like, wow, that was a lot of hours last week, and sending the invoice and just waiting for the angry email to come back into my inbox after they read it. And so just none of that. It's all they know upfront how much it's going to be, and it's such a great example. I know I keep saying this, but it's such a great example of like a very clear desired outcome, but it's got this uncertainty in the middle of it because you've got this third party that's basically deciding, and your job is essentially to give them a way to say yes. But there might, there's probably all kinds of politics and lobbying by the other, people that live around there. There's probably all kinds. It's like totally out of control. But if you're good at what you do, you probably can affect the outcome. Surely you can affect the outcome. So it's great to it's just a fabulous little it's just such a tight little example versus like a software project where it really stretches out. There's a lot more working hours. Usually it's not as much waiting time because we're not waiting for a third party, or might be waiting for stuff to come back from the client or them to do testing or something like that. There's not like 6 weeks of not hearing, of just like we're just waiting for someone else to get back to us and then we'll move forward. So it's a really nice little example. And it's just the fact that it calls out the risk and like how much risk do you want to take? You can take no risk, you can take all the risk, totally up to you. And there's really nothing else going on. You're not really going to do anything differently at any 3 of the levels. It's the same thing. It's just completely a different pricing model for each one, different risk model for each one.
Yeah, I think that's what obviously resonated in the email that you obviously first sent to the subscribers, in terms of, because that was my initial feeling after reading sort of Alan Weiss's book, Value-Based Fees, and it felt very linear and sort of two-sided. So you got the expertise of the consultants working with a company, and essentially the outcome and the result almost felt like it was just the execution by the company on the advice of the consultant, and it was mainly sort of 2 people involved. So my dilemma was, well, actually we've got multiple third parties involved. So I resonated with the sentiment on your email, because that was the cogs of, well, how can I continue with this sort of, as I say, it's not pure value pricing, but it's an hourly, which is the positive. Um, and how can I work with this to cater for the world that I exist in? And that was, so far. So I think it was, and obviously then sort of wrote back, just because I think it's important probably for people to hear that there is seems to be like always a way to, if you think hard enough, there's a way to do
Yeah,
it.
so I love the way that you adapted it to your particular domain, which is an unusual situation. And I guess the thing that I would call out to people, because everybody's in a different domain, even if you're in software, there's probably all different things that you do: DevOps, front end, back end, whatever. So for people listening, probably the main thing to call out from this episode is how clearly Ben is like articulating the risk models, and that like the 3 options, it's the exact same scope of work. And imagining, because I get a lot of people that are like, oh, there's no way for me to come up with 3 options for this proposal. It's like, well, yeah, there is. Here's one that would literally work. And I'm not saying it would be attractive in every domain, but it's certainly an approach. It's like where you're mixing. I mean, the first price is basically value, based on value, your tier 1 price. And then the tier 3 is the success model. So you're mixing 2 different models, but the success fee is based on the value, but then it's multiplied by risk. So if you just think about, so people listening, if you think about what the client might be worried about, like what are their fears in forking over this money to you? Like, even if you do a great job, what else could go wrong? Like, let's say they trust you and they know you're going to do a great job, but what else could go wrong that perhaps they're worried about? And then if you want to, there's some risks, right? There's some uncertainty. They might not follow through on their end, like you said, with a regular 2-party consulting model. They might simply not follow through, or their employees might revolt or not adopt the software that you build. There's all these different things that can happen. So if you can find out what the client is afraid of, then perhaps your 3 options are the base one, where I'll do the thing you asked me to do, and that's that. The second tier is sort of shared risk model, and the third one is you, the seller, take all the risk, but the price, if that risk doesn't come to pass, like if the approval comes through, then you hit the lottery. So it's just a great example, especially with yours, because it's like it's an approval. It's so black and white. It's a yes or no. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. No. Glad to add a bit of value, hopefully.
So I would love it if we could do a follow-up episode in like a year or something and see how the model's grown for you. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I can keep some sort of examples back, and some of the wins, hopefully, and I suppose equally just reflect on some of the near misses. But definitely that.
That'd be great to do a follow-up. Well, if anyone listening needs a stable built in rural England and you can't get it approved, you know who to call.
Absolutely.
All right, Ben, thanks for joining me. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
All right, folks. That's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly. Bye.